Uh, okay, I think we're all systems go over here. So we are sponsored by A.B. Spry for long-term nachas from all of his children, and by Michal Avram Chavin, that everybody should finish Shas with gesund and understanding. We have over here Shimon Klein, Aaron Swade, Mel Zachter, Marshall Castle, and Mark Frankel, Shelley Zeitlin, Yitz Fuchs, Richard Lenner, who finally made it back, and Nachman Chapler with lovely grandchildren, Michal Chavin. We have Gedalia Engel, Yisrael Fisher, who is in Tannersville. But Yisrael Fisher is about tshuva, and he will be joining us even from Brooklyn. And Menachem Yamansky, Dr. Guy, Rabbi Kranz, it's wonderful to see you joining us. Berish Gesserman, Ilya Shutman, as we just get underway on this beautiful Chol Hamoed Thursday evening. We are holding by Omer Matiran, which is 4 lines from the bottom of Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis. And remember what we're talking about over here now. What we're talking about here is where we said that karka, there's no shvuah on karka, but there's no ainah on karka. Our question is, what if you put seeds in the ground, but they didn't take root yet? Is that still considered karka because it's in the ground? Or is it considered as if they're in a jar in storage and it's not considered ground yet? Right? The difference would be if it's considered ground, then there's no oath because einish ban ala karkais. If it's considered like it's in a holder, then you would take an oath. So now the Gemara asks another variation of this question as we welcome in Yitzi Muller just joining us, and Stephen Holtzman, Ilya Shutman. So, Omer Matiran, or Ein Omer Matiran. And this is a good reminder that after the shir we are going to say the bracha of Svira. So let's not forget about that. Make sure you remind me that we don't tune out before we say the bracha of Svira with everybody. We know that on the 16th of Nisan, when we bring the Omer, it permits the new crop. So Omer Matiran or Ein Omer Matiran? Does the Omer permit seeds that are in the ground or not? Nehechi dami. Ida ashrish tanina, if it already took root, we have that covered in the Mishnah. And ida loy ashrish tanina. And if it didn't take root, we also covered it. And this is a little bit counterintuitive. The Tanan, imishrishu kaidem la'aymer, if it took root before they brought the Aymer on the 16th of Nisan, then Aymer Matiran. Then that's considered this year's crop, and the Aymer permits it to be eaten. V'im lav, but if it didn't take root yet, so then Asurin, it's Asur, ad sheyavoy Aymer Abba, until the next year's Aymer. So, what's your question? Says the Gemara, the question is like this. Leit tzricha, the chatzdinu, what happened is Rich harvested his crop, and v'zar'inu, he took the kernels, and he planted them kaidem la'aymer. V'asalei aymer, and then the aymer came, v'chalaf ilvayu, and passed by it. They offered the aymer on the 16th of Nisan. V'loi ashrish kaidem la'aymer. It didn't take root. But what Rich wants to do, he got very hungry, uncontrollably hungry, and his wife didn't have any ladyfingers in the house and no kosher Pesach stuff. So he wanted to dig up some of the kernels and munch on them. So that's the question. Did the Aymer Mahu. Could he take it out of the ground and munch on it? It didn't take root yet. As we welcome this Mati, I'm not sure who this Mati is, if it's our friend Mati Eisenberger, I'm not sure. Do we say, when it was put in the ground, it was as if it was put in a jar. And since it was harvested before the Eimer, so then this Eimer permits it. Then v'sharinu Eimer, then the Eimer would permit it. Oidilma but linu agavara, it's bottled to the land, and you have to wait until the next Eimer. So take on all these questions, Tishbi Yatar, it's Kushas Ribayis. Amarav Chasta, Boy Rabbi Ami, we said that by karka, by real estate, by avodim, by servants, the selling of promissory notes, there's hektish, there's no overcharge of a sixth. Bittul mekach yesh lehem, but will the sale be voided if there's an overcharge of more than a sixth? Or perhaps there's no voiding of the sale either. Amar Rav Nachman, Hoda Amar Rav Chasta. Afterwards, Rav Chasta further said, Poshit Rav Ami. Rav Ami resolved, there's no if it's a sixth. Bittul mekach, but if it's more than a sixth, yeshlem, the sale of karka is voided if there's an overcharge of more than a sixth. Rabbi Yaina says he was saying this only about hektashes. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar karkois. He was saying it about real estate. V'travayu mishmei Rabbi Yochanan Amru, both said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Oina ein lahem, there's no sixth, but bittul mekach yesh lahem. Now, Mandi Amara Hektashis, the one that says that is Oina, that is bittul mekach by hektish, then kol shechein akarkois. Then surely by karka it will be voided if it's more than a six. Mandi Amar akarkois, but the one that says that it's going only on real estate, but it's only on real estate, aval hektesh is loy, but it's not by hektish. He holds because there's no mistake by hektish. There's no mistake by God. And therefore, even if it's an overcharge of more than a six, there's no bittul mekach. There's no voiding of the sale. Why? Manda amar karkois aval hektashes loy kedishmuel. Like Shmuel says. Remember we said, Amar Shmuel, hektish shava mana, hektish that's worth a mana, shechilu al shava pruta, even if you redeemed it on a shava pruta mechulal. So we see that there's no ayna by hektish, even if it was a hektish worth a full mana, full 100, and you were mechalal it, you redeemed it on a shava pruta mechulal, it's redeemed. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there in the Mishnah, im hayakaidish balmum, if let's say a dedicated animal got a blemish, yotza l'chulin, it goes out to chulin, v'tzarach la'asei slei damin. The din is, if let's say Mark Frankel has a animal of hektish that got a blemish, and he redeemed it onto an animal of less value. So it goes out l'chulin, but he has to make up the difference. He has to make up the difference between the two. In other words, if let's say the animal that got blemish was worth $400, and he deconsecrated it onto an animal worth $300, he has to compensate hektish with $100. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan says, Yotza l'chulin dvar Torah. Biblically, it goes out l'chulin on the animal of 300. But b'tzarch lasas lo'idamim midivreim. But he has to compensate a hektish only midrabanan. Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish says, no, he has to compensate midoraisa. Reish Lakish Amar, af tzarch lasas lo'idamim minatayr. Now the Gemara says, b'may askinan. What are we talking about? If the differential was a sixth, ilema b'chtei oina, but we learned, Reish Lakish tzarch lasas lo'idamim minatayr. Would Reish Lakish say about this that you have to compensate biblically? But we said there's no Eina hektish because it says in the pasuk Rei Eyu. But Tanan Elu Dvarim Shein Lem Eina Hakakais V'Avodim Ashtaros V'Akdeshus. We said by hektish there's no Eina because the pasuk says Rei Eyu. Ela Bitul Mekach. It must be voiding the sale. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan tzarch lasas lo'idamim midivreim, that Mark only has to compensate rabbinically. I v'amar Rabbi Yochanan ahekdeshus v'Rabbi Yirmiyah amar akarkos. So v'amar Rabbi Yochanan that there's bitul mekach by hektish, and Rabbi Yirmiyah said it's by akarkos. V'Travaya, when both of them said mishmei Rabbi Yochanan Imrei, they both said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Oina ein lahem, there's no sixth, bitul mekach yesh lahem. So if there is voiding of the sale, so how could Rabbi Yochanan say that Dvar Torah, Mark doesn't have to compensate for the extra $100? Says the Gemara, la'olam bebitul mekach. Really, it's talking about where it's more than a sixth. The Eipach to Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, or the Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. We have to switch Rabbi Yochanan to Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. It must be that Rabbi Yochanan holds that he has to compensate taka midvar Torah, and it's Reish Lakish who says you don't have to do it midvar Torah. And therefore, since he says that you have to compensate midvar Torah, that stems with what he says, that there is bitul mekach by both karka and by hektish. Says the Gemara, another answer. First, the Gemara says, "B'may kamiflagi." What are they arguing in? Could be the Shmuel. They're arguing about Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, hektish shava mana shechilul shava pruta, a hektish worth mana that you redeem on a shava pruta mechulul. It's already redeemed. Marius lay the Shmuel, the one who holds that the compensation is only midrabanan, holds like Shmuel. So midoraisa, it's already deconsecrated, even on much less. Omar less lay the Shmuel, the other one doesn't hold of Shmuel, and therefore he holds that the compensation has to be midoraisa. However, and here they're arguing, I'm not letting people in, that's very bad. And here they're arguing, in that you could do this only b'di'evet, to redeem it on the worth of a pruta. But in the first instance not. You could deconsecrate it even in the first instance. However, the Gemara wants to say that there's another way to wiggle out of this dilemma. It's not talking about more than a sixth. It's talking about a sixth. And you're not going to have to switch around Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. But here it's an interesting thing. We learned in the Mishnah always that by hektish there's no ainah. That means that there's no, if it's a sixth, there's no claim of fraud. Here Rav Chisda wants to suggest another definition entirely. What does it mean by hektish there's no ainah? That means that by hektish there's no share of a sixth. You have to return the differential even if it's less than a sixth, even if it's a seventh or an eighth. So it's a chumrah by hektish and not a kula. But Rav Chisda kamifli. The Amar my ein lahem oina, einam b'tayras oina. It's more severe. You have to return the overcharge even if it's less than a 6. The afilu, as the Gemara continues on Zayin Amid Beis, the afilu b'pachas michtei oina. Even if it's less than a 6 chayzer, even if it's less than a 6, you have to return it. Says the Gemara, Meisvei, ribis v'ayna lehedyet, there's interest and fraud by a hedyet, ve'ein ribis v'ayna lehektish, there's no interest and fraud by hektish. So the Gemara says, what's the problem? When we say ayna, we mean that there's no share of a 6th, it's even less than a 6th. Says the Gemara, Mi alima mamasnisa, is this more of a difficulty than our Mishnah? Do kimna b'toira, say, I know that we said that there's no Torah of a 6th, even less than a 6th, you have to give it back. Hachanami ribis v'din ayna lehedyet. There's no law of Aina. That means that it's even if it's less than a 6. Says the Gemara, it says in the Sefer that this is a severity by Hedyet than by Hektish, but that's not true. According to you, that we're saying that by Hektish it's even less than a 6, so then that's a Chumrah of Hektish over Hedyet, over a commoner. Says the Gemara, well, Aribis, it's going on the interest, that there's an Isser to take interest by a commoner, but Hektish doesn't have an Isser to take interest. So the Gemara says, but by Oina, Hektish is more Chamer, so then it should say the flip side, listening Nami Zeh Chaimer Hektish Mebehedyet, that this is a severity of Hektish over a commoner. Oina, that is by a Hedyet you get until a 6th, but by hektish it has to be returned even if it's less than a 6th. Says the Gemara, there's no chiddush to tell me what's more severe by hektish than by hedyet. Of course, kachim is more severe in a million areas. That this is a chumrah by a hedyet than by hektish, that hedyet has an iseribus, hektish doesn't. Hektish only has this chumrah over a commoner. Hektish has many chumras over a commoner. It's tumah until Ravi, until the 4th generation. You're only allowed to eat it in certain places. There's many chumras. Says the Gemara, okay, could you tell me what's the case of ribis of hektish that we say that there's no Issa Ribis by Hektish? What exactly are we talking about? Ribis de Hektish Heichidami. What does it mean that there's no Ribis by Hektish? Ilema de Oisve Gizber Meya B'Meya Ve'esrim, that the Gizber took some money from Hektish. He thought he could use the money of Hektish. He took some money of Hektish, lent it to Shelley, lent him 100 for 120. And we're saying that there's no ribis. Says the Gemara, but as soon as the temple treasurer took the money of Hektish to give a personal loan to Shelley, he was moyal, he committed trespass, because you can't give loans with the money of Hektish, and it goes out l'chulin. If it goes out l'chulin, then there is interest. The money would go out l'chulin, and then there would be ribis. So what's the case where there's no ribis by money of hektish? Here it's talking about where, let's say, Rabbi Yisrael accepted l'sapek slosais me'arba. He agreed to provide flour for the whole year at the rate of 4 sa to a seller. And what happened is the price went up, and instead of seller being worth 4, it's only worth 3 sa per seller. V'amdu b'shalosh. So the din is that even though they made up that the provider would provide at the rate of 4 sa per seller, but there was a inflation, and now only 3 sa is worth a seller. We say that the provider still yad hektish al yaina, and the provider still has to give 4. Now that sounds like ribbis, for the fact that hektish is waiting for the delivery. The provider is giving him, instead of 3 sa per seller, 4 sa per seller. If he accepts to provide 4 sa per seller, and it went out, the price went up to 3 sa per seller, misapek me'aba, he has to give 4 sa. Mishalosh, if they made up to provide 3 sa per seller, v'amdu me'aba, and now the price went down, and it's 4 sa per seller. Misapek me'aba, he has to give 4. So it turns out that we're saying that because hektish had to wait for the delivery, hektish could take more than they made up, and we don't say that it's ribbis, because there's no ribbis by hektish. Yad hektish al yain. Rav Papa says a different pshat. Rav Papa says it's talking about where the gizbar had stones that were going to be built into the temple. Now they made it that those stones they remain chulin until you put it into the walls of the temple, in order that people shouldn't commit me'ilah. And it's telling you, until you put those stones into the wall of the Beis Hamikdash, if the gizbar lent it, he could take ribbis on it. Which does not have sanctity until you build it in the wall. They built it while it wasn't sacred, and only when it was in the wall did they dedicate it as a safeguard that nobody should commit meal on it. And if the gizbar lends it out in the interim, then he could charge ribbis for it. Now we learned ein b'hem tashlumei kefil on karka, on avodim. There's no on shtoros, on notes, on hektish. There's no payment of kefil. So minani mili, how do we know that there's no kefil by karka, by avodim? The Tan Rabbanal called var pesha for any matter of trespass klal. Al shor al chamor al sal salma, for an axe, a donkey, a sheep, and a piece of clothing. Prat. Al kol aveidah sheyomer kiyuzeh. Any lost article, the marshal claims that it's this, and really it was more. Right? So for any act of theft, so it's a klal product klal, chazav klal, so it's a klal product klal, generalization, specification, generalization, where we say, iata don elekein aprat. It has to be similar to the specification, which was shar, chamor, seh, and clothing. Ma prat mafurish davar metaltal, it's a movable, the gufay mammon, and it has intrinsic value. Alf kol davar metaltal, the gufay mammon. So anything that's immovable and has intrinsic value. Yotzu karkois sheina metaltal, it's not immovable. Yotzu avodim shehukshu lekarkois, that's juxtaposed to real estate. Yotzu shtarais, notes, shafal pishim metaltal, even though it's immovable, ain't gufan mammon. It doesn't have an intrinsic value. It's only what it represents. It's only a raya. Hekdesh, there's no kefil because it says re'eyu. Amakra re'eyu v'lei hekdesh. The next thing we said in the Mishnah, v'lei tashlumi dalav v'hei, by Karka by avodim, there's no dalvei. Now that would be nageya, not by karka, not by avodim, but it would be nageya by hektish. If an animal of hektish is stolen, there's no dalad vehei. My time up, because since there's no kefil, dalad vehei incorporates the kefil. So without the kefil, which we excluded from re'eu, it would be gimel and dalad and not dalad and hey. And there's no such thing as gimel and dalad. As the Gemara says, my time in tashlumei dal ve'amarachmana v'loy tashlumei shloisha v'arba. It's not 3 and 4. And since we've already said there's no kefil, it wouldn't be 4 and 5. It would be 3 and 4, and there's no such thing. Sheimer chinam eino nishpa. If Marshall is an unpaid custodian, somebody is out of their mind and gives something to Marshall to watch, right? So we said that he doesn't have to swear if it's karka, if it's avodim. How do we know this? If a man gives to his friend klal, that's a generalization. Kesef or kalim, a silver or utensils, prat. And then it says, "V'gunav mebeisa ish," it's stolen from the house of the man. Chazer v'klal, so that's a generalization, specification, generalization. Klal prat, klal v'yat don elikena prat, which is kesef or kalim. Ma prat mafurish davar metaltal, it's something that's movable. And v'gufay mammon, and it has intrinsic value. Af kol davar metaltal gufay mammon. Yotzu karkais, it excludes real estate she'enon metaltal, it's not a movable. Yotzu avodim shehukshu lekarkais, it's juxtaposed to karka. And yotzu shtarais she'af al pi she'metaltal, even though it's a movable, ein gufay mammon, it doesn't have intrinsic value, it's only as a raya, as a proof. Hekdeshais, and hekdesh Amakra re'eyu. It says re'eyu, only a friend, v'lo shalektish. Now we continue that noisei sacher. Let me just make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Noisei sacher, a paid watchman, ein misham, doesn't pay, even though normally a paid watchman is chayiv b'gneva v'aveda, but a paid watchman is not chayiv b'gneva v'aveda by hektish avodim, karkois, and shtoros. How do I know the Tanur Rabbanan ki yitini shel re'eyu if a man gives to his friend? Klal. Chamoroi shoroi this pasuk is talking about a paid watchman. A donkey, an ox, or a sheep, prat. V'chol behemo, any animal, lishmar. So chazav v'klal. Again, klal, prat, klal. Generalization, specification, generalization. Iatadon elakena prat. What was the prat? Shor, kamor shor oiseh. So ma prat mafurish davar hamataltal. It's movable v'gufay mammon. Av kol. So also the din that a Shomer Sacher has to pay for Gneva Vaveda, that's called Davar Metaltal, something that's movable, the Gufay Mami, Yatsu Karkois, Sheina Metaltal, it's not movable, Yatsu Avodim, it excludes Avodim, Shehukshu Karkois, it's juxtaposed to Karka, Yatsu Shtaris, it excludes notes, Shapal Pisha Metaltal, and even though they're movable, ain't Gufan Mammon, it doesn't have intrinsic value. Hekdeshis amakra re'eyu, it says re'eyu v'lo yishal hekdesh. I'll just pause a moment over here to turn over the channel